The Xylos Galactic Zoo was once the crown jewel of interplanetary tourism, a sprawling complex that housed thousands of species from across the galaxy. However, recent budget constraints and mounting pressure for efficiency had dimmed its luster somewhat. Director Kalen, a native Xylan with soft violet skin and elongated limbs that moved with practiced grace, stared out of his office window at the bustling grounds below. Despite being sympathetic to all species under his care, Kalen found himself increasingly bound by regulations and the politics of running such a massive institution. He turned to face Elara, the human team leader who oversaw Earth's small contingent of zookeepers. She stood with arms crossed, her weathered face set in lines of practiced neutrality. Years of working with apex predators had taught her when to show emotion and when to keep it carefully contained. "The board's decision is final," Kalen said, his voice modulated to the soft, melodic tones that humans found most agreeable. "Your team will exclusively handle the apex predator exhibits from now on. Shadow stalkers, razor wings, crimson lurkers, all of them." Alara's expression didn't change, but Kalen noticed the slight tensing of her shoulders. "And the reason for this sudden specialization? We've been managing mixed exhibits for 3 years without incident." Kalen moved to his desk, fidgeting with a holographic display to avoid meeting her gaze. "Efficiency. Your team has shown remarkable aptitude with dangerous species. It's a natural fit that confines us to the most hazardous sections of the zoo," Elara noted dryly. "The sections where accidents have the highest fatality rate, where most Xylan keepers refuse to work without triple redundancy shields and full automation." Kalen sighed, his chromatophores flickering with stress patterns. "The decision makes sense on paper, Elara. Your team has the best safety record with predators. The board simply wants to maximize that success." Outside Kalen's office, a group of Xylan administrators passed by, casting sidelong glances through the transparent walls. Their whispers were just loud enough to carry through the thin barrier. "Sending the humans to the death pens," one murmured. "About time. Certainly saves on retirement benefits." Another replied with a laugh that caused the luminescent dots along their neck to pulse in amusement. Elara pretended not to hear, though Kalen knew her augmented hearing implants would have picked up every word. The casual cruelty wasn't new. It was merely more open now that the segregation had been formalized. "When do we start?" Elara asked. "Immediately. Your team has been cleared from all other duties." Elara nodded once and turned to leave. "Elara," Kalen called after her. "I'm sorry. I truly am." She paused, but didn't turn around. "Save it, Director. We'll manage. We always do." The door slid shut behind her, leaving Kalen alone with decisions he couldn't fully explain, even to himself. The next morning, Elara led her team of 6 humans through their daily routine in the Shadow Stalker Enclosure. The massive habitat was designed to simulate the dense jungles of Noctis Prime, with bioluminescent foliage casting an eerie blue glow through perpetual twilight. Shadow stalkers were apex predators that stood 4 meters tall on 6 powerful legs, with a hide that could shift colors to perfectly match their surroundings, making them nearly invisible until the moment they struck. Marcus, the youngest member of Alara's team, carefully prepared a nutrient mixture while monitoring the vitals of the largest stalker in the enclosure. "Hemoglobin analogs are still elevated, but better than yesterday," he reported. "I think the new diet is working." Elara nodded, keeping a careful eye on the dense foliage where she knew, rather than saw, 3 stalkers were watching their every move. The humans wore no protective gear beyond light jumpsuits. No weapons, no shields, no visible safety measures that visitors or other zoo staff would recognize as such. "All right, Sasha, time for the monthly physical on Nightshade," Elara called to her deputy, a stocky woman with close-crop hair and a collection of scars along her forearms. Sasha nodded and pulled out a small device that emitted a subsonic pulse. To human ears, it made no sound, but Elara watched as the foliage parted and the largest shadow stalker emerged, its massive form materializing from the darkness like a nightmare given substance. "Good morning, beautiful," Sasha spoke in a calm, firm voice. Physical day. You know the drill. The creature let out a low rumble from somewhere deep in its thoracic cavity, but approached with surprising docility. Its 6 eyes, arranged in a semicircle across its broad head, blinked in sequence, a behavior that Alara's team had identified as signaling recognition and relative calm. The rest of the team moved into position, each person, maintaining specific sight lines and distances. There was no shouting, no sudden movements. Every action was deliberate, every word measured. The Shadow Stalker permitted Sasha to scan its vital signs, check its dentition, and even inspect a healing wound on its lower limb. From the observation deck, a group of junior Xylan zookeepers watched with a mixture of horror and reluctant fascination. "They're insane," one whispered. "No force shields, no tranquilizers at the ready." "It's because they're expendable," another replied. "The director can replace humans easily. No one cares if they get eaten." But as they watched, none of the Shadow Stalkers made any aggressive moves toward the humans. When Sasha finished her examination, she simply stepped back, deactivated her device, and the creature melted back into the undergrowth. "Remarkable control," the youngest Xylan admitted. "I've never seen stalkers so calm." The oldest of the observers, a veteran keeper named Trill, made a dismissive gesture. "It's not control. It's luck. Give it time. Those humans will end up as feeding enrichment soon enough." What none of them noticed was Alara's subtle hand signals to her team, the carefully choreographed movements that kept them positioned optimally at all times, or the small devices they all wore at their belts that emitted specific pheromones and sound frequencies that helped modulate the predator's behavior. These weren't the crude control mechanisms the Xylans relied on, but subtle tools developed through years of careful observation and collaboration with the creatures themselves. Later that day, as Alara's team finished their shift, they passed through the safe, herbivore section of the zoo, where Xylan keepers were maintaining exhibits with full automation and multiple layers of protective barriers. "Alara! Hey, Alara!" A voice called out. Alara turned to see Zeph, one of the few Xylan keepers who treated humans with anything approaching collegiality. He jogged toward them, his tall frame bobbing awkwardly with each step. "Heard about your reassignment," he said, falling in a step beside them. "The rumor mill says you insulted someone important." Alara smiled thinly. "The rumor mill gives me too much credit. We're just being optimally utilized." Zeph's face shifted through several colors, the Xylan equivalent of a grimace. "Well, watch your backs. Not everyone's happy having humans here at all. There have been incidents. We've noticed," Sasha said dryly. "Funny how equipment only malfunctions when we're using it, or how enclosure doors fail specifically during our shifts." Zeph looked uncomfortable. "I've tried reporting some things I've seen, but there's never enough evidence," Alara finished for him. "We know. Don't worry about us, Zeph. At least with the apex predators, we can see the danger coming." As they continued walking, a commotion erupted near the gentle giant's enclosure, a habitat for massive but docile herbivores from the gas giant moons of Krona. A feeding platform had malfunctioned, dropping several tons of specialized feed in an uncontrolled cascade. 2 Xylan keepers were frantically trying to halt the system, while a third attempted to calm the startled creatures. "Atmospheric interference again," one keeper explained loudly to concerned visitors. "These systems are sensitive to ionospheric fluctuations." Alara paused, her eyes narrowing as she observed a maintenance panel that had been recently accessed. From her angle, she could see tool marks around the seals that shouldn't have been there. Her gaze met Marcus's, who had also noticed. They said nothing but exchanged a knowing look. As they continued toward the staff quarters, a message flashed across Alara's personal communicator. It was from Kalen, "My office. Urgent." When she arrived, Kalen was not alone. A tall, imposing Xylan with elaborate ceremonial markings stood by the window, his posture rigid with authority. Even without an introduction, Alara recognized Bishop Vorel from countless news broadcasts, a high-ranking official known for his traditionalist views and rigorous adherence to Xylan methodologies. His reputation for disdaining primitive species like humans was equally well known. "Ah, the human supervisor," Vorel said, not bothering to use Alera's name. His translator was set to a formal mode that added an imperious tone to his words. "I've been reviewing your unusual deployment in this facility." Kalen's chromatophores were displaying stress patterns, though he maintained a neutral expression. "Bishop Vorel is conducting an unscheduled inspection of our operations. He's particularly interested in our predator management techniques." "I find it difficult to believe," Vorel continued, addressing Kalen rather than Alera, "that placing fragile primates with apex predators constitutes proper safety protocol. The mortality statistics should be staggering." "Actually," Alera interjected, causing Vorel to turn toward her with obvious surprise that she would speak without being directly addressed. "We've had 0 fatalities and only minor injuries in 3 years. That's a better safety record than the automated systems in the herbivore sections." Vorel's upper limbs twitched in irritation. "Impossible. The Shadow Stalkers alone have a recorded aggression coefficient that would predict at least 7 fatal incidents per standard cycle with organic handlers." "Perhaps the predictive models need updating," Alera suggested mildly. Vorel turned to Kalen. "I want to see these practices firsthand. Tomorrow I will inspect both your standard operations and these experimental approaches. If I find violations of Galactic safety protocols, I will recommend immediate closure of those sections." After Vorel had departed, Kalen slumped into his chair. "He can shut us down, Alera. One word from him, and the board will terminate the human program entirely." "Why is he really here?" Alera asked. "The timing seems convenient." Kalen's colors shifted to a pattern Alera had learned to recognize as indicating ethical distress. "There have been complaints. Anonymous reports about dangerous practices and unacceptable risks with human handlers. I suspect someone wants your team gone and is using Vorel's inspection as the mechanism." Alera leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time you told me the real reason you moved us to the predator enclosures. We both know it wasn't about efficiency." Kalen was silent for a long moment. "I couldn't prove it," he finally said. "But after the 3rd accident that nearly killed one of your team in the supposedly safe zones, I realized you were being targeted. The predator enclosures were the only places I could put you where you'd have more control over your environment, where the automated systems that kept malfunctioning are minimal, and where the other staff rarely venture. You put us with the galaxy's most dangerous creatures to protect us," Alera said, a hint of dark amusement in her voice. "That's quite the irony. It was the only solution I could implement without proof of sabotage," Kalen admitted. "And it worked. Your safety record speaks for itself. But now Vorel threatens everything," Alera finished. "We'll just have to show him what we can do." The next morning, Bishop Vorel arrived with an entourage of assistants and security personnel. His ceremonial robes had been replaced with practical field attire, though still adorned with symbols of his rank. His expression was one of barely concealed disdain as Kalen greeted him. "We'll begin with the standard exhibits," Vorel announced. "I want to establish a baseline of proper procedure before witnessing these unconventional methods." The first stop was the Floating Gardens, a gravity-modulated habitat for creatures that evolved in low-gravity environments. Xylan keepers in full protective gear operated primarily through robotic proxies, with force fields securing each section. "Note the triple redundancy systems," the senior Xylan keeper explained proudly. "If any containment measure fails, 2 backups engage automatically. Staff safety is never compromised." Vorel nodded approvingly. "Proper protocol. Well-maintained equipment. This is how a professional xenozoological facility should operate." As the demonstration continued, one of the floating creatures, a gas bladder herbivore about the size of a small car, suddenly rose too rapidly toward the upper atmosphere simulators. A warning chime sounded, and a containment field activated to prevent its escape. "Minor atmospheric pressure fluctuation," the keeper explained smoothly. "The system compensates automatically. No danger to staff or specimens." Alera, standing at the back of the group, noticed a maintenance panel near the atmospheric regulators with its access light blinking in an unusual pattern. She quietly tapped a message into her communicator to Kalen. Check atmospheric control logs after this. Pattern indicates manual override, not malfunction. Kalen gave no indication he'd received the message, continuing to guide Vorel through the exhibit with professional deference. The bishop seemed pleased with the structured, technology-heavy approach, commenting favorably on the minimal direct contact between keepers and specimens. This is zoological management as it should be, Vorel declared. Systematic, predictable, and properly distanced. As they moved through other safe exhibits, Alara observed multiple small irregularities that would be imperceptible to someone not specifically looking for them. Maintenance access that showed signs of recent tampering, system logs with unexplained gaps, backup protocols that had been subtly reconfigured. None triggered major failures, but all created minor incidents that the Xylan staff quickly dismissed as routine fluctuations. By midday, they had completed the tour of standard exhibits and Vorel's satisfaction was evident. Exemplary standard practices, he told Kalen. Now let us see these human-managed sections and evaluate how severely they deviate from proper protocol. As they approached the outer security perimeter of the Predator complex, Vorel's entourage grew visibly nervous. The Shadowstalker habitat was infamous throughout the galaxy, housing creatures responsible for hundreds of deaths on frontier worlds before being relocated to controlled environments. Before we enter, Kalen said carefully, I should explain that human management techniques differ significantly from our standard approaches. They may appear unstructured or even unsafe by our metrics, but their results speak for themselves. Vorel made a dismissive gesture. I anticipate chaos and am prepared to document all violations of galactic safety standards. I expect I will be recommending the termination of this human program by day's end. They passed through the final security checkpoint into a transitional chamber. Beyond the reinforced viewport, they could see the twilight world of the Shadowstalker habitat stretching out before them. Unlike the brightly lit, orderly exhibits they had visited previously, this one seemed deliberately wild, almost untamed. Where are the automated systems? Vorel demanded. The force barriers? The emergency response robots? Minimal automation in this habitat, Kalen explained. The humans prefer direct management approaches. Madness, one of Vorel's assistants murmured. Absolute madness. As they entered the observation area, they saw Alara's team already at work inside the habitat. Marcus and another handler named Kai were conducting what appeared to be a training session with a juvenile Shadowstalker, using hand signals and vocal commands rather than the control collars or neural inhibitors that would be standard Xylan practice. The creature, still larger than a full-grown Xylan, was responding to their commands with remarkable precision, moving through a series of behaviors that demonstrated both physical health and cognitive function. What are they doing? Vorel asked, unable to hide his astonishment. Where are their protective fields? Their defensive weapons? They don't use them, Kalen said simply. They find better results with trust building and behavioral reinforcement. Trust. Vorel nearly spluttered the word. With a Shadowstalker, these creatures evolved specifically to hunt sentient prey. They're classified as irremediably dangerous in all standard taxonomies. As if to underscore his point, the juvenile stalker suddenly paused in its exercises, its head swiveling toward the observation area. All six of its eyes fixed on the visitors, and a low, rumbling growl emanated from its throat sacs. Vorel instinctively stepped back, but Marcus merely made a subtle gesture and spoke a few quiet words. The stalker's posture immediately relaxed, and it returned its attention to the training session. Impossible, Vorel whispered. Alara approached the observation window. Would you like to come inside, Bishop? See our work up close. The horror on Vorel's face was almost comical. Enter the enclosure. Without protection. We'll ensure your safety, Alara assured him. But you'll understand our methods better if you observe them directly. After considerable hesitation and assurances from Kalen about emergency protocols, Vorel reluctantly agreed to enter the habitat with a minimal security team. His assistants remained safely behind the observation glass, their expressions ranging from fascination to abject terror. Inside the habitat, the atmosphere was different, humid, rich with organic scents, alive with subtle sounds that the sterile observation area had filtered out. Voral stayed close to his security detail, his body language rigid with tension. "We're currently conducting health assessments on the entire pack," Ilera explained as she led them deeper into the habitat. "Today we're working with Nightshade, our alpha female. She's overdue for her biannual comprehensive exam." "You examine them without sedation?" Voral asked incredulously. "Sedation creates unnecessary stress and can mask important symptoms," Sasha explained as she joined them. "We've developed alternative approaches." They reached a clearing where the massive adult shadow stalker waited. Nightshade was fully 7 meters long from snout to tail, with musculature that rippled beneath her dark, color-shifting hide. Her 6 eyes tracked the newcomers with predatory intensity. Voral froze completely. Even his security team, armed with stun weaponry, seemed paralyzed by the creature's presence. "Nightshade, we have visitors," Ilera said calmly. "They're here to observe your checkup." The creature made a rumbling sound deep in its throat, but remained still, its posture alert but not aggressive. "How are you controlling it?" Voral demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're not controlling her," Ilera corrected. "We're communicating with her. There's a difference." What followed was a demonstration that left Voral speechless. The human team worked around the massive predator with practiced efficiency, checking vital signs, examining teeth and claws, and even taking tissue samples, all without restraints or sedation. They used small handheld devices that emitted particular frequencies, combined with vocal commands and specific body positioning. "The key is understanding," Ilera explained as she worked. "Shadow stalkers are highly intelligent and have complex social structures. They respond to consistency, clear boundaries, and respect. Fear-based control methods, like automated systems or inexperienced handlers typically use, actually trigger aggression responses. This contradicts all established xenobiological management principles," Voral said, though his tone had shifted from dismissive to cautiously curious. "Perhaps those principles need revision," Ilera suggested. "We found that many supposedly irremediably dangerous species are actually quite predictable when approached properly, more predictable than some other factors in their environment." As she spoke, a piercing alarm suddenly blared through the habitat. Nightshade immediately tensed, her hide rippling with alarmed color patterns. The sound was followed by a high-frequency screech that seemed to come from the devices at the humans' belts, their communication and behavior modulation tools. "Systems failure," Sasha called out, checking her device. "Sonic modulators are malfunctioning." Nightshade rose to her full height, disoriented and clearly agitated by the conflicting signals bombarding her sensitive auditory systems. Her massive head swung toward the visitors, 6 eyes dilating with stress. Voral's security team raised their weapons, but Ilera shouted, "No, don't fire. You'll make it worse." Instead of retreating or seeking shelter, the human team moved with astonishing coordination. They positioned themselves between the agitated predator and the visitors, using their bodies as shields while simultaneously executing what was clearly a practiced de-escalation protocol. Marcus pulled a manual override device from his pack and worked to reset the sonic modulators. Sasha and Kai placed themselves directly in Nightshade's line of sight, making specific gestures and vocalizations that seemed to momentarily confuse the creature, interrupting its threat response. Ilera addressed the rest of the team. Secondary Protocol 3. Now, the humans moved with practiced precision, creating a defensive formation while simultaneously working to calm the predator and fix the malfunctioning equipment. Their courage was startling. None showed panic despite facing a creature that could kill any of them with a single strike. After tense moments that seemed to stretch into eternity, Marcus successfully reset the sonic modulators. The proper calming frequencies resumed, and Nightshade gradually relaxed her aggressive posture, though she remained agitated. "Easy now," Alara said soothingly to the creature. "Just a glitch. We're fine." Voral stood frozen, having witnessed both the near disaster and its remarkable resolution. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its imperious edge. "Your team just placed themselves in mortal danger to protect us. That's the job," Alara said simply. "Keep everyone safe, visitors, staff, and animals." Kalen was examining one of the modulator devices with growing concern. This wasn't a random malfunction. The disruption's signature indicates deliberate interference. Someone triggered this from outside the habitat. Voral seemed about to dismiss this assessment, but stopped himself. "You believe this was intentional? To what purpose?" "To demonstrate that our methods are unsafe," Alara said bluntly. "To validate your preconceptions and ensure you shut us down." Voral's expression shifted through several colors. "A serious accusation, which we've been making for months," Kalen added quietly, "without sufficient proof to take action." The tension was broken by Alara's communicator. "The Razorwing Habitat team is ready for their demonstration," she announced. "Shall we continue the inspection there?" Voral hesitated, clearly rattled by what he had witnessed, but unwilling to show weakness. "Yes," he finally said. "I must see all operations before making my assessment." As they exited the Shadow Stalker habitat, Voral fell into step beside Alara, keeping his voice low. "Your team showed remarkable courage back there." "We trust each other," Alara replied simply. "And we understand our charges better than most. But surely automated systems would be safer." "Safer for whom?" Alara interrupted. "Technology can be hacked, overridden, or sabotaged far more easily than trained human intuition can be fooled. What you just witnessed was likely an attempt to do exactly that." Voral had no immediate response, and they continued in silence toward the Razorwing enclosure. The Razorwing habitat was a vast, open-air aviary that stretched 100 meters upward, enclosed by nearly invisible mesh that allowed atmospheric conditions to flow naturally while containing the massive aerial predators within. Razor wings were enormous flying creatures with wingspans up to 12 meters and razor-sharp projections along their leading edges that could slice through most materials with horrifying ease. As they entered the observation platform, they could see human handlers on the catwalks high above, conducting complex flight training exercises with 3 adult razorwings. The creatures soared and dove with astonishing precision, responding to subtle cues from their handlers. "Note the absence of flight restriction tethers or neural suppressors," Kalen pointed out. "Standard protocol would require both, plus automated defense systems in case of aggression." "This is—" Voral seemed to struggle for words. "Unorthodox." "It's effective," Kalen corrected. "Their injury rates are 60% lower than comparable facilities using standard containment methods, and behavioral issues have decreased by 78% since implementing human management techniques." Voral watched the aerial display with clear fascination despite his reservations. "The creatures seem content." "They are," Alara confirmed. "Razor wings need regular complex flight patterns for physical and mental health. Restricting them creates stress and aggression. By working with their natural behaviors rather than suppressing them, we actually create a safer environment." As they continued to observe the flight demonstration, alarm klaxons suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began flashing, and an automated voice announced, "Warning, atmospheric containment breach detected. Emergency protocols activated. All personnel evacuate immediately." Panic erupted among Voral's entourage. The security team moved to surround the bishop as facility doors began automatically sealing in response to the perceived emergency. "What's happening?" Voral demanded. Kalen rushed to a control panel, his fingers flying across the interface. "The atmospheric containment system is reporting a critical failure in the eastern quadrant. If accurate, it could compromise the entire habitat." On the catwalks above, the human handlers were quickly directing the razor wings to their secure roosting areas while communicating urgently through their devices. Unlike Voral's group, they showed no panic. only focused, practiced responses to the emergency. Something's wrong, Elara said, studying the diagnostic readouts over Kalen's shoulder. These readings don't match what we're seeing. The atmosphere isn't decompressing despite what the sensors claim. Another false alarm? Kalen asked. No, Elara said grimly. Look at the security field indicators. Parts of the containment mesh are actually powering down. This isn't just a sensor malfunction. Someone is actively sabotaging the system. Vorl pushed his way to the console. Impossible. Our security protocols are being overridden, Kalen finished, pointing to a pattern of access codes flashing across a secondary screen. Someone with high-level clearance is shutting down sectors of the mesh. If they succeed, the Razor Wings could escape into the general zoo areas. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Visitors were being evacuated from nearby exhibits, causing confusion and panic. Emergency containment doors were malfunctioning, some closing when they should remain open, others failing to seal properly. The carefully regulated systems that Vorl had praised earlier were now creating chaos rather than order. We have to manually override the system, Kalen declared. Elara, get your team. Already on it, she replied, gesturing toward the catwalks where her handlers were moving with purpose rather than retreating. They had secured the Razor Wings and were now heading toward the atmospheric control junctions at various points around the habitat. What are they doing? Vorl asked. They should be evacuating. They're saving your zoo, Elara said flatly, and probably a lot of lives. While Kalen worked to regain control of the central systems, which were resisting his authorized commands, Elara coordinated with her team through her communicator. The humans were manually locking down critical systems, bypassing the compromised automated controls. Director, one of Vorl's security team called out, pointing to a maintenance corridor where a Xylan technician was hurriedly exiting a restricted access panel. Unauthorized activity detected. Kalen immediately dispatched security to the location, but the saboteur had already slipped away from the immediate area. The next 15 minutes were a blur of coordinated activity. Elara's team, displaying intimate knowledge of the facility's systems that went far beyond their official duties, systematically secured the habitat piece by piece. Kalen worked with security to lock down potential escape routes for the saboteur, while Vorl, after an initial period of shocked immobility, began coordinating with external emergency services to manage the visitor evacuation. Finally, the alarms ceased. The habitat was secure, the Razor Wings safely contained, and the immediate danger had passed. But the zoo remained in partial lockdown as security teams searched for the saboteur. There, Sasha's voice came through Elara's communicator. Maintenance, sublevel 3. I've got visual on someone tampering with the backup generators. Security converged on the location and apprehended a mid-level Xylan technician named Mril, who had worked at the zoo for over a decade. When confronted with evidence of his actions, he didn't deny them, letting primitives handle our precious specimens. Mril spat when brought before Kalen, Elara, and Vorl in a secure office. It's a desecration of proper order. Humans shouldn't even be allowed as visitors, let alone given authority over Xylo's biological heritage. So you created emergencies to discredit them, Kalen said, his voice heavy with disappointment. To protect our standards, Mril insisted. These humans use no proper protocols, no proven methodologies. They rely on primitive instinct and superstition. Their primitive instincts just saved this facility from your sophisticated sabotage, Vorl said quietly. The bishop had been uncharacteristically silent since the crisis had been resolved, observing everything with new eyes. Security led Mril away for formal charging, leaving Kalen, Elara, and Vorl alone in the office. How long has this been happening? Vorl finally asked. The sabotage? At least 8 months that we can document, Kalen replied. But the prejudice? Since the first human was hired. And you placed them with the predators to protect them, Vorl said, looking at Elara. Not to endanger them. It was the only solution I could implement without proof, Kalen admitted. The predator habitats gave them autonomy, minimal interference from automated systems that could be compromised, and an environment where their unique skills actually provided protection rather than making them targets. It's ironic, Elara added. The Shadow Stalkers and Razorwings are dangerous, yes, but they're honest in their danger. We can predict them, prepare for them. The real threat was always the hidden prejudice hiding in supposedly safe spaces. Vorl stood and moved to the window overlooking the now-quiet zoo grounds. I came here to shut down what I perceived as dangerous practices, he said slowly. Instead, I witnessed remarkable skill, extraordinary courage, and the failure of systems I've advocated throughout my career. What will your report recommend? Kalen asked cautiously. Vorl turned, his chromatophores displaying a pattern neither Kalen nor Elara had seen before. A complete overhaul of our approach. The humans stay, not just in the predator habitats, but integrated properly throughout the facility, with authority to implement their methods where appropriate, and a thorough investigation into systemic prejudice within our operation. He looked directly at Elara. Your team displayed a courage and competence that shames many of my most decorated security units. I was mistaken in my assessment. The days following the incident brought dramatic changes to the Xylos Galactic Zoo. Mrill's confession led to the exposure of a small but influential group of xenophobic staff who had been engaging in systematic sabotage, targeting not just humans, but all non-Xylan employees. The investigation uncovered dozens of accidents and malfunctions that had been deliberately engineered. Bishop Vorl's report, contrary to all expectations, was a scathing indictment not of human practices, but of Xylan institutional prejudice. He recommended not only retaining the human program, but expanding it, while simultaneously implementing major reforms in security protocols and management philosophy. The predator habitats remained safe not because of our technology, he wrote, but despite its sabotage, thanks to the intervention of those we wrongly dismissed as primitive. This institution has privileged procedure over results, tradition over effectiveness, and in doing so endangered the very creatures and people it claims to protect. A week after the crisis, Elara stood once again in the Shadow Stalker habitat, conducting her regular checks on Nightshade. The massive predator lay relaxed beside her, occasionally making the low, rumbling sound that Elara had come to recognize as contentment. Interesting few days, Kalen said, joining her in the habitat, something he had rarely done before. Vorl has recommended you for the Galactic Conservation Merit Award. First human ever nominated. Elara smiled slightly. Not interested in medals. Just want to do our work. Without someone trying to get us killed. That's becoming more likely, Kalen replied. The review board has approved your team's expansion. You'll be training Xylan keepers in your methods now, supervising the integration throughout the zoo. And our predators? Still yours, if you want them. No one's arguing with success anymore. Elara reached out, gently touching Nightshade's massive flank. The creature rumbled again, its 6 eyes half closed in apparent trust. You know, Elara said quietly, when I first came here, I thought the predators would be our biggest challenge. Turned out they were the most honest relationship we had. Kalen's chromatophores rippled in a pattern of thoughtful acknowledgement. An unfortunate truth. I should have confronted the prejudice more directly from the beginning. You did what you could with the evidence you had, Elara replied. Sometimes protection looks strange from the outside. Their conversation was interrupted by Sasha's arrival. She approached with the confident stride that came from years of working with apex predators, nodding respectfully to Nightshade before addressing them. The new training program is ready, she reported. First group of Xylan keepers arrives tomorrow. They're nervous, as they should be, Elara said with a small smile. Healthy respect is the first lesson. Kalen made a sound that approximated a human chuckle. Vorl has personally selected some of his most traditionalist colleagues to participate. He believes, and I quote, nothing cures prejudice like facing a shadow stalker with only a human between you and certain death. Converting fear into respect, Elara mused. Not a bad strategy. The following morning brought an unprecedented sight to the shadow stalker habitat. A group of 10 Xylan keepers, their body language betraying their anxiety despite their professional attire, stood at the habitat entrance. Their chromatophores displayed a chaotic mix of stress patterns, creating a distracting light show that Alara knew would agitate the stalkers if not addressed. "Before we enter," she announced, "everyone needs to stabilize their color patterns." The stalkers interpret rapid color changes as potential threats or prey in distress. A senior Xylan keeper named Grawl stepped forward, his posture rigid with barely contained skepticism. "Our species' natural stress response cannot be simply turned off, human." "I'm not asking you to turn off your feelings," Alara replied evenly. "I'm asking you to control your expression of them, just as I control my voice, breathing, and body language around the predators. If you can't manage that basic level of self-discipline, you'll endanger everyone." The challenge hung in the air. For a moment, it seemed Grawl might refuse, but then his chromatophores gradually settled into a muted, stable pattern. One by one, the other Xylans followed suit. "Better," Alara acknowledged. "Marcus will distribute the sonic modulators now. These are tools, not crutches. They support communication, but don't replace it. If you rely entirely on technology, you'll fail when technology inevitably fails." As Marcus handed out the devices, Grawl examined his with obvious suspicion. "We were told these were some kind of control mechanism." "We don't control predators," Marcus explained patiently. "We communicate with them. The modulators translate certain intentions into frequencies they understand. That's all." Alara continued with the orientation, explaining the habitat's features, the stalkers' behaviors, and the protocols the human team had developed. Throughout her explanation, she could see the Xylan's expressions shifting from dismissive to reluctantly curious. Theory was one thing. They would soon face practice. "We'll meet 2 juvenile stalkers today," she concluded. "They're smaller than the adults, but fully capable of lethal action if threatened. Follow our lead exactly. No improvisation on your first day." As they entered the habitat, the atmosphere changed immediately. The artificial twilight, the humid air thick with organic scents, the subtle sounds of massive predators moving just out of sight, all created an immersive environment that theory couldn't prepare them for. Several of the Xylans began displaying stress colors again, despite their best efforts. "Breathe," Sasha advised them. "They can smell fear, but they don't automatically attack it. Fear is normal. Panic is dangerous." Kai and another human handler named Jiro appeared on a path ahead, accompanied by 2 juvenile shadow stalkers. Even at their young age, the creatures stood taller than any Xylan, their 6-legged frames moving with predatory grace, their multifaceted eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. One of the Xylan keepers made an involuntary sound of alarm, and immediately both stalkers focused on the group, their hide patterns shifting to alert coloration. "Easy," Kai called to the creatures in a calm, firm voice. "New friends today. Just learning." The stalkers paused, heads tilted in identical poses of assessment. The tension was palpable as instinct warred with training in their primitive brains. "Grawl," Alara said quietly, "step forward slowly and activate your modulator." Setting 3. The senior keeper hesitated only briefly before complying. He moved forward with admirable control despite his obvious terror, activating the device as instructed. The subtle vibration it emitted was nearly imperceptible to the humanoids present, but clearly registered with the stalkers. Their posture relaxed slightly. "Good," Alara encouraged. "Now the greeting gesture we practiced." Grawl raised one hand, palm outward, fingers slightly spread in the specific configuration they had been taught. The juvenile stalker nearest to him mimicked the gesture with one of its front limbs, a behavior the humans had carefully reinforced through months of patient training. The moment was transformative. Grawl's chromatophores shifted to display astonishment and the first hints of something approaching respect. Several of the observing Xylans made sounds of surprise. "They're intelligent," one whispered. "Of course they are," Jiro replied with a slight smile. "Most predators are. You have to be smart to hunt effectively." The mistake is confusing intelligence with moral reasoning or empathy. They're brilliant hunters, but don't understand mercy or ethics. That's why clear boundaries matter more than control techniques. The training session continued, with each Xylan taking turns practicing basic interaction under the watchful eyes of the human team. There were tense moments, a misused modulator, a too sudden movement, but the humans smoothly intercepted each potential escalation before it could develop into danger. By session's end, the transformation in the Xylan keepers was remarkable. The dismissive attitudes had largely vanished, replaced by a more complex mix of caution, respect, and budding fascination. Even Grawl seemed subdued, his earlier arrogance tempered by the reality of what he had experienced. "Tomorrow, we work with adult specimens," Alara announced as they exited the habitat. Today was an introduction. The real lessons begin when you face Nightshade. Word of the training spread quickly throughout the zoo. By the end of the week, other departments were requesting human consultation on their exhibits. Species that had been considered management challenges were suddenly viewed in a new light, with staff wondering if human approaches might yield better results than traditional Xylan methods. In his office, Kalen reviewed the transformation with quiet satisfaction. Visitor numbers were rising as word spread about the new practices. More importantly, incident reports were declining across all habitats as staff began questioning automatic responses and seeking deeper understanding of the creatures in their care. Bishop Vorel had made good on his promises. His influence had protected the program from those who still resisted change, and his continued public support lent credibility that was crucial during the transition. Director, his assistant called through the communication system. Security has completed their investigation of the sabotage network. The final report is ready for your review. The findings were more extensive than even Kalen had feared. 27 staff members had been involved to varying degrees, from active sabotage to deliberate negligence when they observed others tampering with systems. The network had been operating for over 2 years, gradually escalating their activities as the human presence expanded. Most disturbing were the communication logs showing how they had justified their actions, not as prejudice, but as maintaining proper standards and protecting Xylan's scientific tradition. They had convinced themselves they were the defenders of order against primitive chaos, never questioning whether their traditions might be flawed or incomplete. Later that day, Kalen shared the findings with Alara in a private meeting. "It's worse than we thought," he admitted. The sabotage was just the visible surface. The underlying belief system was far more pervasive. Alara nodded thoughtfully. "It usually is. Prejudice rarely announces itself as such. It dresses up as tradition, as standards, as simple common sense that everyone knows. That makes it harder to fight. How do we address something so deeply embedded?" Kalen asked. "The same way we work with predators," Alara replied with a small smile. "One interaction at a time, with clear boundaries and consistent consequences. And by creating an environment where better behavior becomes the path of least resistance." 3 months after the crisis, the Xylos Galactic Zoo hosted an unprecedented event, a symposium on interspecies management techniques, with Alara's team as the keynote presenters. Zoo administrators from across the galaxy gathered to witness the transformed predator program and its expanding influence throughout the facility. The demonstration that generated the most excitement was a joint handling session where human and Xylan keepers worked side by side with adult shadow stalkers, displaying a level of cooperation and safety that challenged conventional xenozoological wisdom. Bishop Vorel, now a vocal advocate for the program, addressed the assembled delegates with surprising humility. "I came to this facility prepared to condemn what I did not understand," he told them. "I nearly recommended the dissolution of a program that has proven to be this institution's greatest strength. It is a powerful reminder that our most deeply held beliefs deserve our most rigorous scrutiny." The symposium concluded with the announcement of a new galactic initiative to review predator management throughout affiliated facilities, with Alara appointed as co-chair alongside a prominent Xylan conservationist. That evening, after the visitors had departed, Elara took a rare moment of solitude in the Shadow Stalker habitat. Nightshade found her there, approaching with the quiet confidence of a predator who has no need to announce her presence. "Hello, old friend," Elara said softly as the massive creature settled beside her on the rocky outcropping. Nightshade made the rumbling sound that had become familiar over their years together. Not quite affection by human standards, but something like recognition and acceptance. In the predator's world, that was perhaps the closest thing to friendship that could exist between hunter and prey species. "Ironic, isn't it?" Elara mused aloud. "They put us here thinking it was a death sentence, and instead it became our strength. The most dangerous place turned out to be the safest." Nightshade's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, her attention fixed on Elara with that unnerving predatory focus that never quite became comfortable, no matter how long you worked with these creatures. "You never pretended to be anything but what you are," Elara continued, reaching out to touch the creature's flank. "There's honesty in that which is refreshing." The stalker rumbled again and shifted slightly closer, not enough to threaten, but enough to demonstrate a preference for proximity. It was as much trust as such a creature could show, and in the complex world of interspecies relations, sometimes that was enough. As twilight deepened into the habitat's night cycle, Elara sat with the galaxy's most dangerous predator beside her, contemplating the strange path that had brought them to this moment. The real danger had never been the creatures everyone feared. It had been the prejudice hiding in plain sight, cloaked in respectability and tradition. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had been kept in the predator enclosure for safety, not because the predators weren't dangerous, but because in facing an honest danger, they had been protected from a more insidious threat of bigotry hiding behind smiles and procedures. Nightshade stirred beside her, 6 eyes scanning the darkening habitat with evolutionary vigilance that never rested. Predator and human, wary allies in an unexpected sanctuary, united by mutual respect for the danger each represented to the other, and by the understanding that had grown between them through honest confrontation rather than comfortable lies. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a beginning. One interaction at a time, they were building something new, a future where different species might work together not by denying their natures, but by understanding them completely, with clear eyes and without fear.